Yo, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy Naruto Explain here, bringing you guys another review for Minato's one-shot manga drawn by Masashi Kishimoto, titled Naruto Gaiden, the Whirlwind Inside the Vortex. And like I warned you guys with the spoilers, like we do with the Boruto spoilers, there's a lot of context left out with the spoilers, and I told you guys, do not judge the chapter just based off of the spoilers. And this chapter definitely dropped a lot of lore on us, and it wasn't just about Minato making his jutsu, the Rasengan. We got a combination of statements and feats for teenage Minato. There's enough information to tell us exactly where in the timeline that this one-shot takes place. We have updates on the Uzumaki clan lore, as well as the lore centering around the tailed beast and jinchuuriki, and so much more. There's a lot to unpack in this chapter itself. So with my initial thoughts out of the way, let's back things up a bit and let's get into the recap portion of the review before we further unpack everything in this chapter, which is available right now on OP Scan's website, but will officially come out on the Sunday on Viz Media's app, as well as on the official Manga Plus app. So the chapter opens up with a few color pages to celebrate this one shot, with Minato staring down the form of the Five Tails jinchuuriki, both of which are shinobi from the Hidden Stone Village. And it's the first signs that we're looking at a 15/16-year-old Minato in year 9 or year 8 before Naruto's birth, which timeline wise makes a lot of sense, but we'll address that after we do the chapter recap. We see that the jinchuuriki are taunting Team Jiraiya by telling them that if they were going to fight them on an even footing, then they should have brought the Nine Tails jinchuuriki Kushina. And upon seeing the Biju Dama about to be fired off, Jiraiya tells Minato to get them out of there, and as the double spread shows the Biju bombs rocketing towards them, Minato touches Jiraiya, and the other two teammates also touch Minato so they can teleport away at point blank range right before the Biju Dama detonates, which is pretty clutch by Minato and shows his high level of skill with the flying raijin at just this young age. And even Jiraiya takes note of the fact that Minato cut it a bit short by teleporting them to the kunai they has marked at what appears to be one of the training grounds in the Hidden Grass Hills. Now, based on the location, they appear to be fighting in one of the smaller countries that separate the border between the Land of Fire and the Land of Earth, with the grassy plains on the side Minato teleport them to, but the Biju Dama being shown several miles away beyond the rocky side, likely meaning this is in the Land of Grass on the side that is closer towards the Hidden Stone Village. In one of the last panels we see, we're told the name of one of Minato's teammates, Dikai, and it's then that we're shown that Minato's realizing for the first time just how powerful a jinchuuriki is, with him mentioning that one of the Biju is inside of her, i.e. Kushina. We then see Kurama being a manipulative savage to Kushina, tormenting her in her sleep, telling her that she's more of a prisoner than he is and that he can set her free, basically trying to gaslight her into releasing the seal that's been placed onto her to contain him. We get a really good shot of Kushina waking up screaming with sweat beads on her face, and we see that Kushina has a photo of Mito Uzumaki on her bedside, which is another bit of foreshadowing, because in Naruto volume 53 we saw in a brief flashback of Mito telling Kushina that when she becomes the Nine Tails jinchuuriki, she has to fill her heart with love to balance out the Nine Tails hatred. We then get another glimpse into what I've said here on the channel for several years now, which is that the third Hokage wasn't always the kind old grandpa Hokage that you saw in part 1 of Naruto. And if you're somebody that's never read the manga and any other guides that come with it, you have the wrong idea of the third Hokage. His younger years when he governed the village was a bit more aggressive, likely because he dragged the village into 2 back-to-back wars in the second and the third Great Ninja War. Well, in this chapter we see a little bit of a glimpse in that. We see Kushina with 2 Anbu Black Ops watching over her directly, and we see that her every move has to be approved by the Anbu and people higher up than them. Something as simple as training with Minato in sealing jutsu has to get approved, and we see a hint of how the captivity and the restrictions on her being a jinchuuriki actually was during this time, with the symbolism by Kishimoto doubling down as foreshadowing, where we see Kushina high up in a building taking pleasure in something as simple as seeing a butterfly, but the symbolism comes from how large of a building they're in and how high up it is. The imagery that you see in older folklore, but also in Japanese Shinto and cultural stories from Asia, where the damsel is locked away in a cave or is locked away in a tower, which doubles as foreshadowing for Minato eventually saving her from Kurama, the creature that is tormenting her. Very brilliant use of panel in there. Now, we see more for Kushina in the way that Kishimoto uses the tones in the inking to show a darker page and contrast it with the white speech bubbles, where we see the Anbu tell her that she isn't allowed to leave the barrier under any circumstances, and Kushina's face isn't shown when she says she understands, finishing off with that famous verbal tick that's been passed down from generation to generation from her to Naruto to Boruto, Data Bane, Data Bayo, Data Basa, for each of these characters respectively. We then see Minato looking nervous as Kushina tells him that she won't hold back this time in their training, and she gets excited by stating that Minato learns jutsu very quickly, something that his grandson Boruto certainly got from him, and she says that there are still more sealing jutsu that she can teach him from the Uzumaki clan, but Minato tells her that he cannot continue to train with her right now because he wants to train on his own to master a new jutsu, and Kushina gets annoyed that Minato won't tell her what this jutsu is, but she says she understands when Minato tells her he doesn't want to hurt her. But just as we see Kushina's temper flare up, she's gotten calmed down by the sight of Minato's teammates telling them that they need to go to the third Hokage to give a mission report, and the other two random kunoichi are over there gushing over the idea of asking Minato onto a date. We then see that Kushina tries to run after Minato, but she's stopped by the Anbu telling her that, hey, you can't leave this barrier that we set up. We see the sad look in the eyes of Kushina as she sees the others swarming over towards Minato, and we see a younger Asuma and Kurenai looking at them. We get more of Kushina's situation when she starts looking back at her conversation with Mito Uzumaki, and this is where things get really interesting. We get an extension of the scene from Naruto Volume 53. In the new scenes that we get, Mito tells Kushina that she cannot get love by simply waiting and tells her to come with her. Kishimoto then switches back to the present timeline, and we see Kushina displaying what we're told more than once in the manga, which is that even amongst the members of the Uzumaki clan, she has a special and a rare type of chakra, which allows her to be the jinchuuriki for the Nine Tails, but most importantly, also use those chakra chains, with Kushina and Karin being the only ones in the clan in the manga that we've seen actually use those chains. Kushina then shows off some of what Tsunade mentioned to Jiraiya, which is that Tsunade said that Kushina had a very unorthodox fighting style, and we see that Kushina is easily Jonin level by the way that she takes out the Anbu Black Ops very skillfully just using her chains. When Kushina runs towards the barrier, we get a brilliant moment where Kishimoto uses his panels for anticipation by having Kushina shown running and then suddenly stopping at the barrier and having her foot shake, all while the other people who are around her are walking to and from and around the barrier like it's nothing, and we see the sweat on her face before she closes her eyes out of a mixture of nerves and fear before she finally steps across that barrier line. And as she does so, we see the look of relief spread on her face before we get a close-up of Kurama's eyes, and we're transported back to that dimension that Kurama shares with her, where he tells her that the Uzumaki, they got arrogant, but says that Kushina's also drowning in a vortex of the current era, and continues trying to manipulate her into releasing a seal that's been placed onto him. And we get another great storyboard layout where you see Kurama's eyes in one panel and you see Kushina's eye on a panel on the opposite end of the page, and this is what ultimately guides you to seeing Kushina placing her hand over the eye that's on the same side of the page that Kurama's eye is on in an effort to shut him out. With that one moment right there, you see Kishimoto's influence from the Dragon Ball mangaka Akira Toriyama, because that was something Toriyama was notorious for doing, and that's something that Kishimoto does try to mimic in his artwork. We then shift over to Jiraiya seeing Minato's training, and we see the damage that's caused by the still incomplete Rasengan, and after Jiraiya tells Minato to start trying to rotate his chakra in the direction of his hair pattern, but then realizes Minato has hair that goes in two different directions, he gives Minato a popsicle to cool down from all their training, and Minato jumps to the conclusion that he can just adjust the chakra of the Rasengan in the way that he's been doing, and we see that Minato has finally completed the Rasengan, which leads to a moment moment where Minato does the impossible. He comes up with an even longer and goofier name than any of the jutsu that he named in the 4th Great Ninja War when he was in Edo Tensei, and it low-key becomes a running gag in the chapter with Jiraiya and Kushina poking fun at his names, with Kushina just flat out saying it was lame. Upon seeing that Minato has completed his jutsu, Jiraiya leaves to take up another mission, and it's then that we see Kushina's been watching Minato train for the entire time, and she lies by saying that the 3rd Hokage gave her permission to leave the barrier, and Minato, being as gullible or potentially just being a simp for Kushina, absolutely takes it at face value and believes her. Minato then tells Kushina he created the jutsu with the intention of protecting Kushina, and Minato says that at one point he knows that Kushina is going to get deployed to the battlefield to fight against other jinchuuriki, and he wanted to make a jutsu that she could use against other jinchuuriki in order to take advantage of her massive chakra reserves because he doesn't want to lose her. This leads to Kurama being a cockblock, and he's attempting to steal Kushina's soul like anyone who tells Adam 22 that his wife got her soul snatched in that leaked OnlyFans video. And we see Kurama and we see Kushina was being enveloped by Tail Beast chakra, and one of her tails ends up not just smacking Minato away, but it ends up opening a deep wound in his chest as well, which puts into further perspective just how much stronger this version of Kurama is than what you saw in part 2 of Naruto, because his chakra isn't split up in half. That one tail slap did more damage to Minato than the 4-tail slap did to Sakura, but a slap from a 4-tails cloaked Naruto that only has one half of Kurama isn't the same thing as getting a slap from any tail from Kurama from somebody that has the whole 9 tails. Kurama threatens Kushina to undo his seal or he's going to kill her, which we all know as readers is a bluff, but Kushina doesn't know that this is a bluff, not yet at least. It's then that we see, despite Minato being heavily damaged, he's able to use a sealing jutsu that Kurama says is on the same level of the 1st Hokage, which somewhere Tobirama fans are in the mud because a 15-year-old Minato having skill compared to the 1st Hokage is a major compliment. When Kurama goes off on him, telling Minato to mind his own business, Minato declares his love for Kushina and vows to not lose her, which transitions to more of the lore dump that's surrounding Mito and Kushina and the Uzumaki clan itself. We're told by Mito that the Uzumaki clan lost everything, saying that their clan isn't just known for having a strong life force, which is why Kushina could barely live, which is why Kushina could briefly live after the 9 tails was extracted, and she was able to keep fighting Kurama in the flashback for Naruto Volume 53. We also learned that the Uzumaki clan also have a strong connection to the air currents in the natural world, which can explain why both Naruto and Kushina and Boruto all have a strong wind change in chakra nature affinity. Mito says that the Uzumaki clan's power once drowned out the battlefield, but when their power is used correctly, it can bring out the true balance as they walk across the Uzumaki clan crest on the floor. And when Kushina asks can she actually tame the 9 tails, Mito tells her she has no doubt because she believes in her strength. They then climb up the spiral stairs, and Mito turns it into a teaching moment for a young Kushina who is apprehensive about becoming the 9 tails jinchuuriki. Kushina is told at the top of the staircase that something is sealed inside of Mito that she wants to see, and we see Mito and Kushina looking up at the stone faces of the Hokage, with the 1st Hokage's face being the most prominent on that panel in the view right when Mito reminds her that while they're inside of a vortex that she's trapped in, Kushina, just like Mito, will be able to find love and seal love inside of her. This leads to Kushina fighting back with a renewed resolve against the 9 tails before it can do any more damage to Minato, and we get a brilliant panel where we see the chains flowing out of Kushina and drawn in a way that once again guides you to them actually restricting Kurama, and we see the combination of Minato's seal and Kushina's chains are enough to somewhat restrict Kurama, but when Kurama tries to fire off a Bijudama, he's preparing it. We see Kushina now has 3 tails sprouted and she's regained consciousness, and Minato makes it a point to begin assisting her, and after Kurama goes into the 7 tails Biju stage 2 cloak, he punches a hole in Minato's chest. Despite this and previously getting sliced open by the 1 tails of Kushina, Minato still continues to tighten the seal and proceeds to stalemate Kurama's Bijudama despite it being fired off by a full Kurama and not one half of Kurama like you saw with Naruto under similar circumstances. This leads to Kushina being there to hug Minato when he wakes up after he's been healed by Tsunade in the hospital, and one interesting thing of note here is that we see Tsunade is shown in there without a Byakugo seal, which means that during this time period she hasn't yet completed the Byakugo seal. We then see that Minato explains to Kushina that he saw the Bijudama fired off by the two jinchuuriki and decided to mimic it, making his new jutsu and using their Bijudama as a reference. This confirms something that up until this point was just mere speculation, which is that in Naruto volume 53 or 54, Killer B says that he thinks that Minato created the Rasengan as a mimicking of the Bijudama. There wasn't anything prior to this stated in the manga or in the data books that actually confirmed this. This was just speculation by Killer B up until this point, but Masashi Kishimoto chose this one-shot chapter to give us a concrete confirmation of it. So we do know that Minato saw a Bijudama and got the idea to make the Rasengan, and we learned that he made this jutsu specifically for Kushina, which means Kushina likely knew the Rasengan before death, because Minato says that he wanted to pass this on to her, which when thinking about how she could use the chakra chains, we now see why Jiraiya and Tsunade were praising her, and this leads to Kushina naming the Rasengan as she and Minato stand at the same spot that Kushina was taken to by Mito, and Mito tells her to find love. So now that we got the recap done, there's a lot that we got to touch on here and unpack even further. Minato and Kushina, they're absolutely broken, but this should not be a shock to you. Naruto Manga Volume 53 basically showed us how cracked both of them were, with glimpses in particular for how cracked Kushina was, with her being on her deathbed after Biju extraction, but still having enough chakra to make the chakra chains to hold down the entire Nine Tails and make a barrier in order to contain it so it can't get free. And she was confident enough that she could drag it with her to death, which lines up with Jiraiya and Tsunade praising her for being an incredible shinobi. With Minato, we saw him spamming the flying raijin, despite us learning in the war arc it requires large amounts of chakra to use. Fight Obito, summon Gamabunta, which also requires a ton of chakra, and teleport the entire mass of the full Nine Tails. That is nothing but pure chakra, and despite being low on chakra, he still had enough chakra after the fact to use high-level sealing jutsu. These two characters at age 24 were easily above Biju level in Naruto Volume 53, so it shouldn't be a shock that they were this strong at age 15 or 16, depending on how close you think we were to Kakashi graduating from the academy and becoming a Genin if we go by the Naruto manga timeline, which is exactly what I'm doing. You guys know my stance on Naruto Shippuden filler. It goes in the trash, never to be referenced ever again. Now, this chapter does show some impressive durability feats from Minato, surviving a slash across the chest from One Tails Kushina and Seven Tails Biju State version 2 Kushina, punching a hole in his chest, yet still having the chakra and willpower to push forward in the manner he did. Though we can chalk this up potentially to Minato getting a mental power amp, because he confessed his love for Kushina, and as we've seen and shown this before, you do have the trope that when characters are in love or they're fighting for the sake of a loved one, they do get a power-up. However, before we go into the timeline placement, I do want to talk to you guys about why there's a potential timeline retcon depending on how you view the information in this chapter. So in Naruto's manga, we were told that Minato needed 3 years to create the Rasengan, but the events of this chapter do not happen in 3 years in length. Based off of what we see in the opening pages, this is the first time that Minato had seen a Bijudama being fired off, and seeing it made him want to create a Rasengan because he wanted to give Kushina something to defend herself against the other jinchuuriki when she did eventually get called to the battlefield. With him specifically saying he came up with the references for the Rasengan after seeing the Bijudama on the battlefield. He goes as far as to say he wants to give this jutsu to Kushina. In Naruto Volume 36, we're told that the Rasengan was an incomplete jutsu, which makes sense why Jiraiya in this chapter calls it stage 1 of Minato's jutsu, because as we know from Kakashi's words, Minato always wanted to add a change in chakra nature on top of the Rasengan's maxed out application of change in chakra form. Now, personally, I don't see a problem with what we got, but I do know there are some people that will get annoyed because, just like I saw with some of the comments from the spoilers in the spoilers video, as well as online on Twitter, people got annoyed that the 4 Tails and 5 Tails jinchuuriki had chakra avatars. I've said it a few times, Masashi Kishimoto's never been afraid of making retcons to a story, minor or large, so this potentially joins the list of things like Orochimaru being stated in the Konoha Crush arc to having left the Hidden Leaf Village immediately after Minato's named Hokage, to us learning in the war arc that he was still inside of Konoha several years after Minato's death and working for Danzo during that time. I think the outrage of what we have is enough to actually overlook this, especially given that Minato was stated to have learned things very quickly in this chapter, and given how complex Uzumaki's sealing jutsu is, that makes a lot of sense. Perhaps you can stretch it and say that for the next 3 years after this chapter, Minato tried to perfect this jutsu by adding a change in chakra nature to it, failing, and just considering the Rasengan finished after 3 years since he failed to add a change in chakra nature to it. In that case, it actually works because nobody during this time actually thought of using shadow clone methods of training because of the whole thing about shadow clones. Adding a chakra nature to a rank jutsu like the Rasengan bumps it up to an S rank level of difficulty, so it makes sense that after 3 years, Minato would have given up. Now, as far as the timeline placement, I had initially thought that this might have taken place in the early parts of the Third Ninja War, but after I got my hands on the entire chapter, I wanted to double check, so I got with Swag Kage and I got with King Bullet, because the Second Ninja War ending and the Third Great Ninja War happening took place extremely close together. One misconception I saw from people in the comment section for the spoilers where people were saying that this couldn't have been the Second Ninja War. It made no sense because Jiraiya left the Rain Orphans after 3 years, but in the manga, Jiraiya doesn't leave when the Second Ninja War is over. He leaves when the Rain Orphans grow skilled enough to take out his shadow clone, which is why he believed they're strong enough to survive on their own, and he returns back to Konoha. In this chapter, we see that Minato's wearing a tuning vest, and he's still Jiraiya's underling in this chapter. We have further evidence of this being the case because there is no flee on sight order even remotely mentioned in this point in the timeline, and the jinchuuriki for the Stone Village looks shocked when they see that Minato can use a flying raijin, so at this point in time, he hasn't earned that reputation yet. Nor is there any indication that Minato has his own squad, so Minato isn't a Jonin by this point in time either. Now, the Stone Village and Konoha reaching a tipping point when the Stone Village tried to expand into the Hidden Grass Village, which is on the border of the Land of Fire and on the border for the Land of Earth. That conflict lasted for a while between those villages as a result. Based on this chapter, it looks like they were teleported to a section on just the other side of the Stone Village border inside of the Land of Grass, and that makes a lot of sense. Now, this looks like this could be the start of that conflict that began towards the end of the Second Ninja War and does not get resolved until the Third Ninja War, where Kakashi blows up the Kanabi Bridge in the Hidden Grass Village, and that explains why Minato during that time is going out personally to take care of the Hidden Stone Village ninja. Now, in this chapter, we also see Kakashi, Obito, and Guy as Academy students, which will place us in that funky area again between the tail end of the Second Great Ninja War, but right before the Third Great Ninja War pops off, which would be during the time when Sasori leaves the Hidden Sand Village 4 years before Naruto's birth, which would have made Minato 20 years old, which he clearly isn't 20 during this one shot. And had he actually been 20 in this one shot, Kakashi would have been a gaining. Same with Obito. Now, I think Kishimoto choosing to give us more information about the Second Great Ninja War, that was the right decision, because in the manga, all we had were a few statements here or there, and outside of Jiraiya's time in the Hidden Rain Village, we didn't see anything else in terms of the Second Great Ninja War, but we know it lasted many years and was fought on more than one battlefield. The same with the idea of using the theme of love and the use of symbolism to use whirlpools in order to tie in with the Rasengan's creation, the entrapment, and the release of Kushina, and Minato and Kushina becoming a couple, all while the Uzumaki clan lore is sprinkled into the chapter. I think this was a very strong chapter. The art doesn't look like Masashi Kishimoto lost a step at all. My chapter question to you guys is going to be, what do you guys enjoy most about the Minato chapter, and which are the tweaks that we saw to the lore between how long it takes the Rasengan being made and the two Stone Village jinchuuriki having chakra avatars? Which is the one that you're most likely to accept as being the least of the two evils?